All right, in news just in, the DA says that they will be laying criminal charges against Minister Nobuhle Ngabane for lying to Parliament. The party says they will do this ahead of the Higher Education Minister's budget debate in the NCOP. The charge laying will be led by DA Federal Council Chairperson Helen Ziller, DA Deputy Chief Whip Baxolile and Notata MP, and the DA National Spokesperson Karabo Khachao MP. Of course, they've also just released that statement there saying that tomorrow, on the 1st of July, ahead of the Higher Education Minister's budget debate, the DA will be then laying those charges. This news just in. All right, let's continue with this now. The ANC NWC is expected to deliberate on the latest actions by the DA relating to the GNU. The DA had given the president 48 hours to fire ministers it claims are implicated in corruption and resolved not to participate in the national dialogue. It has also threatened a vote of no confidence against the president. We've now roped in political analyst from the Northwest University, Professor André Duvenhage. Prof, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. I mean, our conversation was really going to be centered around the next steps by the ANC in light of the NWC sitting. But news just in from the DA saying that they will now be laying those charges against the Minister of Higher Education tomorrow, most probably, it seems like it, ahead of the Higher Education Minister's budget debate in the NCOP. Just your comments there firstly, before we continue with our interview. Interestingly, of course, that Minister Nobuhle Ngabane was the very reason that the DA even issued an ultimatum to President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Good afternoon, Unati, and the viewers. I must tell you, this was to be expected. We know that the DA identified these ministers and legal action was to be expected. But my bigger concern at the moment is that the divisions within the government of national unity is becoming deeper and deeper. And as Abraham Lincoln said during the Civil War in the United States of America, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And we are pretty much at that point at the moment. It was interesting listening to the news thus far, and we have listened a lot about corruption and corruption allegations. And we know that the DA made a very strong point about corruption against certain ministers, also identifying the deputy president, Paul Mashatile, in this regard. But at the end of the day, this is also reflecting the racial divide in South Africa. So there are real concerns about the stability and the unity within the government of national unity. And I think I will be surprised if the government of national unity survive until the end of 2026, if not failing a lot earlier. At this point, we need strong leadership that can build bridges. And unfortunately, what I am picking up is higher levels of polarization on all levels within the government of national unity and among senior individuals within the identified parties.
And this is why it's concerning to so many people on so many levels, because should the government of national unity not be utilizing its own mechanisms that it's put in place, you know, in terms of dispute resolutions, but also robust debates? What happened to that before, you know, publicly making these accusations and threats in public? It does become a concern. So this will be the first time the NWC sits since the DA's threats to the GNU and the ultimatum to President Cyril Ramaphosa. How do you think this will all play out in that meeting, also in light, of course, of these criminal charges?
Well, at the moment, it is not only a national issue, it is becoming also an international issue involving international role players, among them Donald Trump and the United States, one of our biggest trade partners. So we cannot discuss this in isolation. It will have and may have serious financial and economic implications for South Africa. But at this point in time, I think a lot will be dependent on the outcome, the decision made by the National Working Committee. My big concern at this point is the allegations with regard to corruption. Will it be investigated? What will happen on that level? On the one side, we have the problem of procedure, protocol, alignment with the government. That is from the side of the ANC, motivating the case against Andrew Whitfield. On the other side, we have serious allegations of corruption implicating senior people. And my concern, and that is a concern reflecting on the ANC, is that they believe they can deal with these matters within the ANC, in-house, with their ethics committee, clearing these people. But this should be a matter that is dealt with by the judiciary, because in a democracy, we should have an independent judiciary. And if the allegations of corruption have some truth, I believe the president should act immediately. At least this is what should be expected in an established democracy upholding the principle of rule of law.
And some may very well argue, Prof, and I take some of your points, but some will very much argue that the reason that the international eyes are on us, and by that I mean the United States of America, is because of the certain groupings of South Africans who have gone to the United States of America to, speak about some of the affairs which, quite frankly, are incorrect in some statements, and in some points quite also defamatory in terms of around the transformation policies of this country, and very much misrepresented.
Unati, the question is how correct or incorrect is the presentations they have made. And what I have seen is that they have tried to verify this position to a large extent. And we have seen the reaction in this context. We must take into consideration that both the ANC on the one side and the DA on the other side is working with different political paradigms. But unfortunately, this is bringing divisions within the nation to the extent that the house is falling apart at this point. And I have no doubt that there was a lot of merit in what some of the people presented overseas. If you look at farm murders, if you look at 140 plus racially defined legislation, because if we look at the basic principle of our constitution is a non-racial, non-sexist, united and democratic South Africa. How can we uphold laws that are based on race? And the B legislation, unfortunately, is defined on racial criteria. And to me, that is just as unacceptable as was the case with apartheid in the period before 1994. In that sense, I believe we need a national dialogue that can address these issues, that can speak to the core of the problems politically, economically, and socially in South Africa.
And I think President Cyril Ramaphosa on numerous occasions has tried to explain why some of those policies do exist. He did that also too in the Q&A session with the NCOP not too long ago. But Prof, as we wrap up our conversation, I want to just also understand in terms of when we bring things back home, the rationale in as far as the DA is concerned. On the one hand, the DA announcing withdrawal to support the budget votes of some national departments, will very likely have no impact. In fact, that's one analyst who said that will have no impact. But just on the one hand, the DA announcing the party will withdraw support for some departmental budgets. That's what we are seeing tomorrow, given the fact that President Cyril Ramaphosa did not adhere to that 48 hours ultimatum. But on the other hand, the DA is saying that it will be an act of vengeance should the ANC respond by not supporting the budget votes of departments headed by its members. Again, we're seeing that to and fro in terms of those arguments. What is the rationale here?
Well, the rationale is it's all about power. It's about what politics is about, namely the authoritative allocation of values and scarce resources. And there's a lot of competition and conflict in this regard. And my take on it is that our democracy need to grow a lot as far as coalition politics is concerned. And at the moment, we do not have the mechanisms in place to deal with coalition politics. That is why we had the problem with regard to the general budget, the national budget. There was no consensus behind the scenes. And my take on it is we need to develop mechanisms, and we must accept that South Africa is under a coalition government, and it was after 2024 the end of one-party domination on a national level.
Prof, a very good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Professor André Duvenhage just responding there to a number of breaking news essentially happening here and this afternoon. The DA saying that it will be laying criminal charges against Minister Nobuhle Nkabane for lying to Parliament. That likely to happen tomorrow ahead of the Education Minister's budget debate in the NCOP. That's the Higher Education Minister. Well, a number then of developments there. This is, of course, ahead of the ANC NWC expected also to deliberate on the latest actions by the DA. We'll keep you informed there about all of these developments happening on the political space.